where you're going right now, but it just seems like they have to run simulations with these things. So they're like, when's the weirdest time we could do this? When we know like one or two people are going to see it, and then we'll just call them crazy people. So to deny their whole story, right? That's basically what they do right now.
Well, when you think of it, the testing of these things would be done in military airspace, right? So the Nimitz photo, the Tic Tac, not the photo, but the Nimitz video, the Tic Tac video, that would make sense if they're out there testing this kind of technology, that they would do it against military air fighters, right? That's who you would want to test it against, is some of the most advanced technology that, quote unquote, that the military has. So it makes sense that they're running around in restricted military airspace. So what we have here is Paul Benowitz. He has this information. He has top secret radio transmissions to Kirkland Air Force Base. He has video of top secret experimental aircraft that the Air Force was working on during this time, but he doesn't know it. He thinks that it's extraterrestrials. These Air Force command is telling them that it's probably extraterrestrials. You got Richard Doty saying that this was extraterrestrial. So whenever the Brigadier General stands up and says, well, what would you like us to really do about this, right? Paul Benowitz wants a grant to continue his investigations into UFOs on the Air Force Base, and also a grant to continue his contact with aliens they claimed that he had. Now, this caught the Air Force off guard because he's saying that he has contact with these aliens, right? And this is where things get really sinister, very sinister. Now, we've established that the Air Force special investigators like Richard Doty and really all of the Air Force personnel were involved in the briefing, were pushing Paul in the direction of extraterrestrials and UFOs, when what he was really getting was video footage of top secret experimental aircraft and radio transmissions from the Air Force Base. But another agency was also involved in this. Now, what had happened is Paul was picking up these signals from Kirkland Air Force Base, which he didn't really know that was the case. He didn't realize that these were military transmissions. So the NSA posted up across the street and would directly beam radio signals into Paul's antenna, into his house, to make Paul believe that what he was getting was from extraterrestrials, and what he was seeing on the computer screen was what he should be seeing, and what he was getting was what he should be getting, right? The NSA literally broke in to Paul Benowitz's house, replaced his computer with an NSA modified computer. The computer has software installed onto it to decode the messages that were being sent to Paul in his house in the way that they wanted Paul to see them. And in these messages,
that is crazy.
They did that. That's how far it's gone. Yes.
Crazy, dude. So I said this before, man, and people could call me nuts. I used to back in the day when I would find like a video that had like some really interesting information, and I go, oh, this is going to be wiped off the internet. I'm going to pull this video, right? Well, one day back at this is my old place, I would go into the video. I'd have a file on my computer, and I would go into the videos, right? And the videos, all the audio was gone. Like they'd replace the videos with videos with no audio. And it never happened since. It was all this crazy, like early on when we were like Pizzagate, all that stuff. You were like pulling all these crazy videos with all this crazy information. One day I go on my computer, all those videos had no audio on them.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Maybe you were being stalked by the NSA.
Well, Ryder, I definitely didn't tell you this, and this is even before both these guys were on the show. Back early into the show, I got like an email that had a U.S. Navy email that sent me all this stuff on Q. And I'm like, and now later on, when we realize that Q is just basically Operation Trust, right? You're like, oh, dude, they sent me that to give me like the push, like along the lines of what you're talking about.
That's right. I've gotten some of those emails too, where
Right?
they're trying to recruit you into spreading this information, and they get really
Yeah.
angry at you when you try and call them out and say that they're full of shit and they're just making stuff up. That's how a lot of people get trapped into this whole thing, and that's where the whole insider thing comes from, right? You know how many people you hear talk about, I got an insider that gives me all this information. That's coming from the
Oh, those
government.
emails like that?
Yeah.
So if you think there's insiders, how insider do you think Bob Lazar was? Do you
Oh,
think he
that's a
knows
great
anything?
question.
Do
Great
you think
question, Xavier.
yeah,
Made up for
came back?
your last awful question that you asked earlier in the show. Go on. We
I
basically
think
asked you what you
that
just said.
I think it's a possibility that Bob Lazar was shown something. Now, if he actually worked on this craft, like he said that he worked on this craft, it is really up in the air because there's no information that confirms that he even had a degree from the place that he went. Now, people still say, oh, well, the Men in Black came in and erased all that information, which possibly, right? But it's highly possible to me personally that he was shown something in order for him to go out and talk about it. Now, there is something that's really interesting that Bob Lazar says that I do think is possible is that he talked about, because whenever he's questioned, he like by where the craft come from, right? And one of his responses is that he was under the impression that at least one of the craft was dug up in an archaeological dig, which makes a lot of sense on where some of this stuff may have possibly come from, which is another kind of switching of the terminology and switching of the meaning of what a crash retrieval actually means. See, when people hear the term
Interesting.
crash retrieval, they think, oh, well, it's something of modern times, right? Or someone, the military or someone saw this craft go down, or they saw it on radar and they immediately went to discover it or went to figure it out, which fits. But a crash retrieval doesn't necessarily need to be something in modern times. It can be something that has been dug up, right? If we all four, let's say we all four decided to go to Afghanistan or Iraq or somewhere in the Middle East, and we did an archaeological dig, the four of us, let's say we're highly advanced archaeologists, we know what we're doing, right? We do an archaeological dig, we find something, we find some sort of strange craft. That would still be a
I
crash
gotcha.
retrieval.
I
It doesn't
gotcha.
matter the amount of time that has passed in between
Yeah.
the crash and them discovering it, it's
Yeah.
still a crash retrieval.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Interesting for sure.
Would you say Roswell was planted? You think that was all fake and let some people see in on it, go tell people, oh, there was a crash, and then the whole hot air balloon thing, you think that was all pretty much get the ball rolling more?
I think so. I think it was a thing to get the mythology going quicker. And the thing about Roswell, which it gets into Roswell further on in the story about Paul Benowitz, because he's also connected to some of the Roswell incident. But Roswell really wasn't popularized and became a site of UFO folklore until 1980 with a book titled The Roswell Incident, which I'm going to talk about here soon. So there's a big lapse.
Shut up, XG. Let him talk.
No, it's a really good point. He brings up a really good point there.
Don't let
and
go to his head.
all these events are really connected, and they all regurgitate each other, and then a little bit of mythology gets out, and then other people compound upon their mythology, and then it becomes something that it was never intended to be in the first place. So we have the NSA posted up across the street. The NSA has broken into Paul Benowitz's house, replaced his computer with an NSA modified computer. The computer had special NSA software installed on it to decode these messages that were being sent to Paul Benowitz in the way that they wanted Paul Benowitz to see him. And in these messages that Paul thought that he was receiving, or getting from extraterrestrials that he thought that he was in communication with through his computer, which was really the NSA.
Dude, that's so crazy. That's so crazy.
In these messages, they said that, and a lot of the mythology comes from this, the NSA messing with Paul Binowitz. A lot of the extraterrestrial mythology, they said that they were from another planet, that they had no water, that they were here for our resources and to take over Earth, and that they only trusted Paul because Paul was the chosen one. How many times have we heard that throughout the times, right? Only I can communicate with the extraterrestrials. Only I can communicate with Ashtar Galactic Command. George Van Tassel in the early 50s. Got the cult of I Am in the early 30s that basically created the entire Saint Germain mythology and was claiming that he was the only one that was in contact with Saint Germain. And it's that same type of rhetoric that the NSA is saying to Paul Binowitz. And they also said all kinds of other things, which are a lot of those things are still talked about within the community to this very day. And with Paul believing he's in communication with these extraterrestrials, it's still a common regurgitated thing within the community. And it's all completely made up by NSA agents. So if you didn't think that that was bad enough with the NSA breaking into Paul Benowitz's home and replacing his computer to make him believe that he was in communications with extraterrestrials, it gets worse. So in May of 1980, state police in New Mexico received a report from a woman calling herself Myrna Henson. She described a story which was involving extraterrestrial aliens, bright lights, herds of cattle being abducted, cattle being sucked up into UFOs. The police then referred the case to their colleague in Dulce named Gabe Valdez. Remember Gabe Valdez that I talked about earlier in the conversation? They knew Gabe Valdez to be the cattle mutilation guy because he basically put on this conference that first introduced Paul to this gentleman or his interest in the cases. Now, Valdez, in turn, then contacted Paul Binowitz. So on May 7th, 1980, Myrna Henson and her son traveled to Albuquerque to meet with Binowitz. They stayed at his home. Henson explained to Binowitz that on May 5th, 1980, while she was driving on the road with her son near Eagle Nest, New Mexico, they had witnessed two large silent objects approximately the size of a Goodyear blimp hovering over a meadow, right? Looks like a blimp. Seems like a blimp. It's probably a blimp. So they then contacted a gentleman named Leo Sprinkle, which was a psychiatrist and a professor at the University of Wyoming, who had been investigating UFO contactee reports. Now, Binowitz arranged for Sprinkle to fly to Albuquerque to hypnotize Henson. Now, when Sprinkle arrived, Henson and Binowitz insisted that the sessions be conducted in Binowitz's Lincoln Town car parked inside the garage with the car windows covered in aluminum foil, right? Paul is literally out of his mind at this point, which I don't blame him, right? You got the NSA right across the street stalking you. You got to be paranoid. You got the Air Force telling you that you're right about the aliens, but you can't tell anyone. So Sprinkle decided to regress this woman in the tinfoil car in Benowitz's garage. And during her first regression, she reported a recollection of a cow being sucked up into a hovering spacecraft by a tractor beam, right? Then on May 11th and 12th of 1980, under hypnosis, Henson then reported recollections of being abducted and being taken to an underground base with body parts floating in vats, right? These regressions would later on evolve into the mythology of the Dulce base and Phil Schneider. So during the session, she also talked about Roswell, New Mexico. Although, like I was mentioning earlier, the public had not connected the town of Roswell to UFO mythology yet, which is really the perfect setup because Bill Moore's book, The Roswell Incident, just a few months later in October of 1980, which was all mis and disinformation about the alien craft crashing in Roswell, which popularized the myth and the lore and brought it to the forefront of ufology. This was a perfect setup for that. And Bill Moore is also a known asset to the military in these three-letter organizations. He was working with Richard Doty, which was the AFSOI Air Force agent that was feeding Paul all this mis and disinformation and deception. So Bill Moore writes this book on Roswell, which gets the lore and the mythology really rolling. No one cared about it. No one knew about it before his book came out. And it just became its own entity and it got the whole thing rolling. And Bill Moore even stood up in front of a MUFON conference in 1989 and tried to tell everybody that this was fake and made up nonsense. And they booed him off of the stage. And no one has heard from him since. Right? So with Hansen claiming to see these large blimp-like crafts, she also recalled having given an alien implant by the aliens during her regression, right? That's where the alien implant lore comes from. Sprinkle returned to visit Benowitz later on to perform another regression with Henson to figure out more made-up stuff. And he found that Benowitz was basically out of his mind. He was armed with a pistol and a rifle, saying that he was concerned that he was vulnerable to being attacked by aliens. You know, these people were literally driving Paul out of his mind to the point where he thought that he was going to be attacked by aliens. It's really a sad story. And he was armed up with guns and tinfoil to protect himself and his family in Henson, and thinking that Leo Sprinkle was an alien or whatever he thought. He told him to leave. And then he contacted another hypnotist by the name of James Harder, which James Harder had also conducted the hypnotic regression on one of the most famous abductees, which is Travis Walton in 1975. And Benowitz and James Harder came to the conclusion that Henson was under the influence of alien beings and wrote detailed instructions on how to use aluminum foil to shield a room from these alien beams. This is literally where all the tinfoil stuff comes from.
Hey,
no one has any idea, bro, that it came from the government mis and disinformation surrounding.
So let me
Paul
ask you
Benowitz.
something, Ryder. Are you here today on this show? Are you saying that you feel all of this is bullshit? Anyone who says they were abducted, anybody who says they were probed, Area 51, all that stuff. You think that is all bullshit upon bullshit?
Well, I'm not here to tell people what they did or didn't experience. I'm just here to lay out the deception, that how far the NSA and the government and the Air Force and the military has gone to spread deception about UFOs and aliens. Right?
Can I ask
tell
I have
somebody what they
go ahead.
experienced.
Put to the fire, gun to the head. Do you think that it's all what we perceive as alien encounters is bullshit?
Well, you have Stephen Greer, that one of the first people to say that they would just stage alien abductions, that they would have these military people dressed up as little gray aliens and abduct people, and they would make them believe that they were on an extraterrestrial craft when they were really in a military bunker. You know, so it's like, I don't know. It's the conclusion that people need to come to on their own. I'm just here to give you the information.
Right. And I'm okay with that.
But if I had a gun to my head and they said, is this made up? Are aliens real? I would have to say that it's the military. and it's always been the military.
And it sounds crazy you saying that military people dressed up like green little aliens or monsters or whatever they were at that moment in time. But I mean, they gave people LSD, Operation Climax. They don't care. They really like, if you think about it, like now you mentioned it, they don't mind abducting someone, putting them in a base, telling you got abducted, and then here, go run with it.
Yep.
Because when you believe everything, when you hear Operation Climax, that's when you believe like, holy fuck, they don't care. Giving you hookers and LSD, it can't get crazier than that.
Yeah, I mean they kill people. Yeah,
I mean, dude.
Quick,
I
can I
mean,
just-
how
I
much
ask a quick
better is the
follow-up to
hooker
the-
and LSD psyop over the
Yeah.
getting probed by
Really?
aliens? Like, will they
Yeah.
knock you out and just wreck your hole, and then you wake up, go, oh, it's aliens, dude.
I have a follow-up to that really quickly. Now, do you think there is a difference in the agenda of the people within the government who are promoting the idea of it being aliens versus those who suggest it's spiritual? Because that's kind of a new thing we've seen over the last 5 years, I would say, is that this idea that, you know, you remember the story about like there's somebody in the Pentagon who thinks it's demons, you know. Do you think there are different agendas at play within the government?
I think so too. We've seen a recent uptick in people saying that they are demons, and there's always been this kind of division within ufology that one side thinks it's a 100% physical phenomenon, and the other side thinks that it's like a more spiritual phenomenon. Now, I can tell you that a big reason that I personally feel that they switched it from UFO to UAP is to encompass more phenomenon, because UAP can be anything. It can be plasma, it can be ball lightning, it can be a satellite, it can be an air balloon, right? So I think that they switched that name from UFO, which I believe UFO was actually, the term UFO started with Project Blue Book. I'm pretty sure they're the ones that coined the term UFO. So then they switched it again to UAP to actually encompass more of the phenomenon. So now anything that you see that's strange can be considered a UAP. And I'm
That's
sure that they
fascinating.
probably know that some of it has to be like weird plasma.
Yeah, well, and there are some, you mentioned ball lightning. I mean, that is among the weirdest natural phenomena, incredibly rare. Have you heard of ball lightning, Sam? Do you know what this is?
Yes, I've heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, the stories
Tell
of
XG
people,
what it is. He doesn't know what it
the
is.
stories of people who've witnessed it. It's just an incredibly rare instance where a ball of electricity. I mean, there are stories of people who had it enter like through a window into their room. And I don't know if I buy those, but there's ideas that it started like historical fires. But yeah, it's just like a ball of lightning that, you know, floats around on its own and then, you know, goes off. And they have no idea what causes it. It's fascinating. And if you saw that, I mean, I could totally see you know, especially to someone without a knowledge of it, being indistinguishable from magic or spiritual, you know, entity entering your space. So shit, man.
So Johnny brought that up, and you were talking about modern UFOs. What do you think about people that saw stuff in like medieval times, where you see it like in a painting? What would you say that is? That was just
Well, it was never called UFOs or flying saucers back then. It was different. It was pillars, it was columns in the sky, it was chariots, it was you know, different types of things that they could try and relate it to in that time period, just like they tried to relate what the flying saucer was in a different context of something that people was already familiar with. As far as those types of sightings, they've happened so long ago that it's hard to depict exactly what they were seeing. I mean, if you had just a slightly more advanced community of people during that time, they would think that what they were seeing was something completely magic when it could have as easily been something that was man-made. Right? And I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility. Again, no proof, no evidence, but that there was a slightly more advanced race of people on the planet during this time, just like we live amongst savages in the Amazon rainforest, right? We're this highly advanced technological group of, well, what we consider technologically advanced group of people that live in most of the world, but there's also very untechnological and savage people also here sharing the planet with us.
So in the big picture, do you believe any of the mysticism of this realm? Are you a God guy? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in maybe extraterrestrial from extra lands beyond? Any of that stuff? Are you into any of that alternative view of our reality?
I think that it's highly possible that, again, that there may possibly be an advanced race of, I mean, it's the crypto-terrestrial theory, right? That these aren't beings from outside of our world or off of our planet or from another planet. They're actually from here. Now, if I were to throw my hat in the ring on the extraterrestrial theory, that's what I would boil it down to. If they exist, I'm not saying that they do exist, but if they do exist, they're not coming from off the planet. They're coming from here. Which then gets into a whole other theory as well, because people, they like to say, oh, well, they're here, they've always been here, they're all around us, they're making hybrid alien human hybrid beings. Well, if you travel to another country, Sam, Johnny, if you travel to another country, SG, if you travel to another country,
He's not allowed to. He's here illegally, so he has to
Thanks
stay
for that
here.
privilege.
Yeah, he's worried if
Yeah.
he leaves, he won't be able to get back in. So
Yeah.
he's got to stay here.
So me and Johnny, we could travel. We're real
okay, if you
people.
if you guys travel to another country, you would be considered an alien. That's what you would be. You would be an alien because you're not from that part of the land. You're not from there. You're an alien. And then, like you just mentioned, illegal alien. If you just put illegal on the front of alien, you get in a completely different context of what an alien is, right? And you think of, oh, well, they are all around us. They have always been here. I mean, look what's just below the United States, Mexico. What's north of the United States, Canada. If someone illegally comes in from Canada or from Mexico, they're an illegal alien. They're around us all the time, 24/7. See, it's another play on words that the community uses when it actually means something completely different. But the perception of what it's been made to mean is wrong.
Interesting, bro. It's all so interesting.
What you're saying about
man.
it being military makes a lot of sense though too, because I mean, we've, with a different reasoning, we've heard that, oh, they appear over military facilities because, they want to keep tabs on it or whatever. But if they are being deployed from military facilities, that would make as much, if not more sense. So.
I mean, and then on that too, I mean, what a coincidence. They came up after World War II, after the nukes and all that. They started popping up a lot more often. So it leans more on that.
Well, when it comes to this Myrna Henson lady, I kind of want to wrap up this whole Paul Benowitz case and this whole Paul Benowitz story here really quickly. It's hard to figure out anything about this Myrna Henson lady because Myrna Henson is also the name of a famous actress and model who won Miss USA in 1953. So it's practically impossible. Yeah. So it's impossible to figure out who she was. You can't find anything on her. It's hard to research and figure out anything about her. But I'm willing to bet that she was sent by the intelligence community directly to Paul Benowitz to give him mis and disinformation. And it's a perfect cover too, because you can't find out any information about who she is, right? And we get into the whole full swing of this Dulce.
That's so interesting what you're saying. Sorry to cut you off. That's exactly what, and Kanye's crazy, but that's exactly why he said they made Black Panther, Marvel made Black Panther, so you couldn't look up the Black Panthers. So every time you look up Black Panthers, it goes in a movie and not the movement.
Yep. That's a old tactic. Yeah. They did the same thing with Looking Glass as well. They did the Alice in Wonderland through the Looking Glass. So now if you try and look up anything about Project Looking Glass, you get nothing but Alice in Wonderland stuff.
Walt Disney as well, Frozen. Walt Disney, that Frozen movie, can't look him that he supposedly he's frozen and stuff like that. It's same theory where they just made up the movie Frozen.
Oh, that's
Frozen
so
pops
interesting.
up.
Walt Disney Frozen. You can't look it up. That's so interesting, dude. Yeah. And so they named this agent named after a famous actress that you put in her name. All you find out is the famous actress and not the agent. That is so interesting, dude.
Yep. So really, it makes sense to me that this Myrna Henson lady is an agent that was sent to Paul Benowitz to probably by the NSA, because Air Force wasn't technically involved at that time of the Myrna Henson case, but I wouldn't put it past them either. But her giving Paul Benowitz all this information and then later evolving into a lot of the mythology and a lot of the lore surrounding UFOs and extraterrestrials in 1981, a letter to U.S. Senator Paul Schmidt. Paul Benowitz wrote a letter and explained that he knew the location of this alien base in northern New Mexico, in the northeast of Dulce, New Mexico, and he knew someone in the military. Here's where it comes. He knew someone in the military that made a deal with the aliens several years ago, giving the Indian land, cattle, and many other things, and the apparent assurance of safety to the aliens in trade for technology in the form of an atomic powered ship. This whole theory came from the mis and disinformation surrounding Paul Benowitz. Right. And then in 1984, Benowitz again talked about the conflict at the Dulce base that led to the closure of this alien human base, which was completely made up fiction by the NSA, which would later be repeated. The Dulce base would be regurgitated by John Lear, Bill Cooper, and most famously Phil Schneider. Now we know where all these stories come from. And that's what Bill Cooper always talked about in the mid 80s, was a contract with the US government and extraterrestrials for technology. But all Bill Cooper did, he just changed it just slightly and added that it was Eisenhower that made this contract and sealed the deal.
Oh, hold on. Did you just say Bill Cooper is full of it too?
He got the information from Paul Benowitz.
Ryder Lee, he chose violence today. Damn.
Well, I mean, when you see where these things originate from, you have no choice but come to the conclusion that that's where all these people got this information from. I mean, Paul Benowitz was out in the UFO circuit. He was talking to all these people. He was talking to Bill Cooper. He was talking to John Lear. He was talking to all these people about the mis and unknowingly the deception and the mis and disinformation that he got from Myrna Henson, the NSA hacking into his computer, breaking into his home, replacing his computer with an NSA modified computer to make him believe that he was talking to extraterrestrials and that the extraterrestrials were giving him all this information. Right. I mean, that's the only conclusion that you can really come to, is where this folklore and where this mythology starts. And it starts with Paul Benowitz. And he contacted all these UFO researchers, John Lear, Bill Cooper, Senators Harrison Smith, and began to spread his ideas regarding the Dulce base with others in the ufological community. And the UFO mythology that came directly from the NSA and what I believe was an intelligence agent in Myrna Henson and Air Force agents was born. And Paul Benowitz suffered many psychiatric hospitalizations after 1980 due to the Air Force and the NSA deception operations. And he ended up passing away in June on June 23rd, 2003 in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow. Wow. That you came, dude. You came loaded for bear, dog.
Locked and
Damn,
loaded,
dude.
baby. And everything that I just said is all documented. It's all documented in the 2005 book, Project Beta, the story of Paul Benowitz, national security and the creation of the modern UFO myth. Mark Pinkerton's book called Mirage Men, that was published in 2010. And then the book was also adapted into a 2013 documentary under the same name, under the same name as Mirage Men, and that has former Special Agent U.S. Of the Air Force Richard Doty. You know, straight up said that in the 1980s he was tasked with hoaxing documents and feeding false information to UFO researchers, including Linda Moulton Howe, Bill Moore, and Paul Benowitz.
Wow. Wow. Ryder Lee, he ain't fucking around, dude. He says, fuck your sacred cow. Okay. Damn, dude. He just went alien on a cow right now, mutilated it. Ryder, you're the man. One more time, tell them where they can find you, brother.
Raised by Giants on YouTube and any and all podcast platforms. You can find my information, and I would appreciate you guys for having me on. Really appreciate it. We appreciate you having an open mind and me being able to come on here and just talk about the research, because I think that that's the most important thing. And again, I can't tell people what they experienced or what they didn't experience, but I can let people know the government involvement, NSA and military involvement in the deception and the mythology of UFOs and extraterrestrials. I appreciate each one of you gentlemen, and I hope the viewers and listeners really liked it.
One more
All right,
quick
man.
question. Wait, I got one last one.
Okay.
What do you have? Any thoughts on Anunnaki? I know that's like not modern UFO, but any thoughts on them being real, messing with the human DNA at all? No.
The Anunnaki?
Yeah.
I think that I don't think that they were gods. I think that they were just human beings. So I think that we've
Are you a
misrepresented-
God guy? Do you believe in God?
I believe in that there is. I don't think that the universe was just created out of nothing. I can put it to you that way. I don't think that all this stuff just happened by chance. I'm more under the impression that it's highly possible some sort of simulation that we're in. It's an advanced computer simulation.